or write your question on the chat session. Today, I can assure you that we will have enough time to the questions. So today we have with us 3 speakers. Mr. Mugabo Patrick, who is a Climate Change Adaptation Officer in Rwanda Environmental Management Authority. We have also Ms. Mukairanga Eva Peace, who is a youth negotiator under UNFCCC thematic area of climate finance, and Mr. Ntawukuriryayo Emmanuel, who is a youth negotiator under UNFCCC in the thematic area of climate change mitigation. So, as we are waiting for Mr. Mugabo Patrick, I would like to request our speaker, Ms. Mukairanga Eva Peace, to come and talk to us, present her presentation about Rwanda youth involvement in climate action. The floor is yours, please. Please, do you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing Karin. Let me go a little bit away from the echo. Hey, Karin.
Hear you.
So can you enable me to share the screen?
Okay, Ineza, can you help us? Can you help her, please? Please, you can share with her your presentation, and then she will share her screen.
Okay. I've shared the presentation.
Okay. As we are waiting for peace, I would like to tell you that we are about our speakers, and then we will have a time for Q&A session. Thank you. Please, we can see the screen. You may go on, please.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Peace. I'm in charge of the finance department in the Green Fight. I'll be talking about the youth involvement in climate actions. Since the inception of the UNFCCC process, youth have shown an interest to take part in it and have only the opportunity, but they were doing so by holding external conferences and presenting declaration to the Conference of the Parties, which is known as the COP. In 2009, the UNFCCC have given the youth NGOs, which is YUNGO, a constituency status, which allowed them to receive official information, conference access, and they were able to participate in different side events or even organizing them. Since then, they have been advocating on issues including adaptation and mitigation. And the one I want to emphasize on is the Article 6 of the Convention, which focuses on climate change education, training, public participation, public access to information, and has been rebranded as the Action for Climate Empowerment, the ACE. The ACE is one of the main priority the YUNGO are focusing on during negotiations, since it's where they've seen that they have power to influence different negotiators on climate change policies. They think it's important. The government of Rwanda has shown the crucial need of young people to take part in the UNFCCC process and have then organized a training of 3 Rwandan youth, myself included, to be able to take part in the negotiation. I was following up the thematic area of climate finance. My colleagues were following the adaptation, gender and climate change, mitigation, and loss and damage. We were able to attend the UNFCCC COP24 and COP25. Personally, my first experience during the COP24, I may say it was a little bit overwhelming since I didn't have enough training on the negotiation. I thought I would catch up on during the room of negotiation. But what I was able to see is that it's an ongoing process, which is why I was focusing on the Article 6 of the Convention, which focus on public participation through etc. We have received a training through UNITAR, and we were able to take part in different workshops that happened. And this has enabled me and my colleagues, I'm sure, to when attending the COP25, to be able to follow up and even some to take part in the room of negotiation and give support or give a point, which was very good. Lastly, I want to say about opportunity available for the youth to make an impact. You have many opportunities to make an impact. The Article 6 of the Convention, the ACE, known as the ACE, has 6
Please, we can't hear you well.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
As I was saying, I want to come upon the opportunity for the youth to make opportunities that are available for the youth that can enable us to make a meaningful impact in the long term. One I want to talk about is the Article 6 of the Convention, which is called ACE. I want to focus on this because I see there is still much to do on this article when it comes to our country, Rwanda. We haven't been able to benefit from this article very much, but this article focuses on 6 priority areas: education, training, public awareness, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation. As I said, the ACE has been a tool used by many youth. I could give example of the UK youth have been taking advantage of this article very much. And there's many young people in the UNFCCC, COP, many youth are present, which is very different to African youth when compared. The ACE calls on government to develop and implement educational and public awareness program to train scientific, to foster access to information to different public, and promote public participation in addressing climate change and its effects. It also urged countries to cooperate in this process by exchanging good practices and lessons learned. This article under the Convention is a good place for youth to influence and take part in making the implementation of this article a reality. I'm certain that many youth civil society in Rwanda are mainly engaged in awareness. This could be a window recognized internationally that we can work upon. And I call upon us to take advantage of this opportunity. Another opportunity I want to focus on is that, as you know, Rwanda is one of the few nations that have direct access to international financial mechanism. And this is possible through FONERWA. FONERWA has been established in 2012 and has been the sole vehicle through which environment and climate change finance is channeled. Government departments and districts can access FONERWA funding, but the fund is also open to private companies, youth, NGOs, businesses, etc. But one of the main problems we face is that the eligibility criteria has a high eligibility criteria. But this is, I think that by working together, we have different civil societies, we can access the fund easily, more than submitting proposals alone. So I think it's very important for all of us, since I'm sure we are here as young people, to work together to be able to access the fund given to us, which is, we have a very great, we are very lucky to be able to have our own domestic financial mechanism, which has access to the Green Climate Fund. So it will be a huge loss if we can't take, we can't use the funds available, which I'm sure they have.
Okay, did you finish, please? We can't hear you.
It.
Excuse me?
I'm done, but I'm not sure if you heard.
Okay. Thank you for your beautiful presentation. I hope many youth among us have been inspired to bring their voices in climate action, since we can see that there is an article like that Article 6 that encourage youth participation, and also that we are lucky to have for Nerwa a fund that can bring to life our projects. So I think many of us have been inspired. Thank you so much. So I would like to welcome our second speaker, Mr. Mugabo Patrick from Rema. I hope you are here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, perfect. First of all, I am very sorry for the delay. I think I was the first speaker on this panel. Am I right?
Yes, but it's okay.
I'm really sorry. I had issues with my computer, so I had to install the app on my tablet very quick. And so that is how things went. My small presentation is on climate action to address climate change. Second slide, please. Second slide. Next. Okay, so I will start by talking about policies and strategies in place. And I will only focus on the key documents that we have. The first document is the Environment and Climate Change Policy, which was published in 2019. If you look at this document, it has 7 policy objectives that covers different themes. Those include climate change governance, adaptation and mitigation response, early warning services, and economic transformation, among others. The second document is the Environment Law of 2018. This law covers the fundamental principles, natural environment, built environment, obligations of the state, prohibited acts, and provides for the way inspections and criminal investigations should be conducted. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Ineza, please, next slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next key document is called the Green Growth and Climate Resilience Strategy. It has been there from 2011, and this document has been really very key in guiding the government and stakeholders during the past 9 years. This document provides about 14 programs of actions. The first one being sustainable intensification of small-scale farming, and then agricultural diversity for local and export markets, integrated water resources management and planning, sustainable land use management and planning, low carbon mix of power generation for national grid, sustainable small-scale energy installations in rural areas, green industry and private sector investment. And next. Climate compatible mining, efficient, resilient transport systems, low carbon urban settlements, ecotourism, conservation, and the payment of ecosystem services promotion, sustainable forestry, agroforestry, and biomass energy, disaster management and disease prevention, and finally, climate data and projections. Each of these programs of action have from 3 to 4 actions which have been implemented and are still being implemented by the Ministry of Environment and the different stakeholder ministries and NGOs, the private sector, and everyone else. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs in short. These contributions were first developed in 2015 during the preparation for the Paris Agreement. So every country had to prepare its NDCs and submit them before the Conference of Parties. And during the Conference of Parties, every submission were compiled together with the articles of the agreement, and the whole thing became known as the Paris Agreement. 1 month ago, Rwanda has submitted the updated nationally determined contribution. That is why I put here the 2020 document instead of 2015. And this new document has 2 parts. The first part is on adaptation, and the second one is on mitigation. So if you look at the adaptation part, you see that there are 24 interventions for the sectors of agriculture, water, land, forestry, human settlement, health, transport, mining, and there are other interventions which are classified as cross-cutting because they don't fall in any of the mentioned sectors. On the mitigation part, we see multiple interventions for the sectors of energy, industry processes and product use, agriculture, and waste.
Oui.
Next. So now we go to policy implementation monitoring. How are the mentioned policies and strategies are implemented? How do we get information about where we are and where we need to go next? So as a ministry with the most direct authority over environment, climate services, and climate change, the Ministry of Environment has the mandate to coordinate with other ministries and other agencies in the implementation of the environment and climate change policy. So the policy is supposed to be implemented through ministerial targets, district development strategy targets, sector strategies, sector strategy plans, the Mihigo, and other action plans. Next. So we don't report at national level only. There are also other mechanisms to report at international level. So internationally, all parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change are required to implement a domestic monitoring, reporting, and verification system that can annually quantify national greenhouse gases emissions by sources and removals, by sinks, and report on the specific actions made to identify and implement mitigation measures. Next. So far, the existing channels that Rwanda used to report to UNFCCC are the national communications and biennial update reports. Rwanda is supposed to produce a national communication every 4 years, but for the biennial update reports, we will be producing them every 2 years. And now we are working on the first BUR. Next. So now I'm going to talk on vulnerability reduction measures. The first measure is to put in place policy and legal and strategic frameworks that are conducive to vulnerability reduction. We have seen the policy on climate change and environment, the existing strategies and the laws and everything else. Now, at operational level, we also conduct regular assessments of vulnerability to climate change to monitor effectiveness of policy action, commend working strategies, and recommend changes that are necessary. The first assessment of this kind was conducted in 2015, and in 2018, we conducted the second one. Both reports have been published and are accessible at REMA website. Next. So now gaps and challenges. There are many challenges in the fight against climate change, but here I will focus on these 4 points. There is a big problem of climate variability and climate and extreme weather events leading to natural disasters, and those are due to floods, droughts, and landslides. And we always hear cases of loss of lives, crop and livestock, health risks, damage to infrastructure, and so forth. The other big challenge is high population density. As you know, Rwanda is the most densely populated country in mainland Africa. So this leads to high pressure on natural resources, and it's not really easy to implement adaptation measures and mitigation measures in such conditions. We do also have a problem of lack of adequate financial resources to implement the good policies and strategies that we have. And this have an impact on the amount of achievements that we manage to achieve. So we also have a problem of limited data and information management. And this is a challenge for policy making. Next. So now about youth involvement. One of the guiding principles of the environment and the climate change policy that I mentioned earlier is inclusiveness. If you look at the policy, this principle reads, effective involvement of youth in environmental management and climate change intervention decision making is essential and should be encouraged. So what you are doing in celebrating Environmental Week, organizing this kind of meetings, and everything else that you do is really commended by the policy of environment and climate change. And it's essential that you really be creative and do more. There are also different policy statements that involve youth in their policy actions. I have not included the details, but if you look at this policy document, you will see many policy statements mentioning the youth, and this will be done in collaboration with youth. Yeah. Next slide. As a conclusion, I would like to say that the government of Rwanda do recognize the role of youth in the fight against climate change. And in addition to direct involvement in adaptation and mitigation at community levels through different projects in schools and at the grassroots level, the youth are also encouraged to participate in climate change decision making at national and international levels. Recently, you have seen many movements across the world. Many of you also know this young lady of the name Greta Thunberg and his big movement. This is a proof that the youth can do amazing things in this fight against climate change. So I thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Mugabo, for your wonderful presentation, for your interesting and informative one. We can see that Rwanda is active in the fight of the climate change. So I would like to welcome our last but not least speaker, Mr. Naokwidiao Emmanuel, who is going to share us about his window of negotiation of climate change mitigation. Welcome, Naokwidiao.
Morning again.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Morning to everyone. My name is. Hello.
Yes, you can continue, please.
My name is Emmanuel Nakudiayo, and I'm a youth negotiator in that thematic area of climate change mitigation. And I'm going to talk about a little bit how Rwanda, or how all of us can contribute or can involve in mitigating climate change. But I will talk more relating to Article 6 of Paris Agreement that talks about market approach to reduce or to implement the national determined contributions. Talking about my experience in negotiations, as Everpeace has mentioned, our first COP, COP24, was overwhelming, surely. But for the second time, we were somehow having some experience, following things, following how the speeches or how the things are going there. So it was good, and it's a good experience. Talking about how negotiations can contribute to a country or implementing or into market approach. When we are in negotiations, we do work together. No one is alone. So during negotiations, we make things together from different countries. Everyone present his position so that we can come with a consensus to implement or to put into practice this Paris Agreement. But how this carbon market involves in implementing Paris Agreement? This comes into Article 6 of Paris Agreement, where the market approach involves two approaches, where there is one we call market approach, and the other one called non-market. So in market approach, there are two options, where there is what we call ITMOs, International Transferred Mitigation Outcomes, where a country can come and buy some units to implement its NDC. But also in carbon market, there is also what we call sustainable development countries, where in conjunction, different countries can reduce emissions that goes into atmosphere but also through reduction those countries are developing. Another one is non-market approach. Non-market approach mostly involves public as well as private sectors to help or to involve in implementation of NDC of one of the country. So this article into negotiations has been, even now there is no consensus on this article, because there is a side of those developed countries, they have their side, they don't want to come and invest more money to buy from as we emit less emissions. So as African groups and least developed countries, we introduce an adaptation fund into this market approach. So it's still a long journey. Maybe into during the next COP, maybe we can come with a consensus on this or an agreement on this Article 6, but by now we don't have an agreement on this particularly Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Talking about maybe my colleague from REMA talk about how we can involve in implementing youth. We all have place and we all encouraged to participate or to help our country to put into actions these agreements. I don't have a presentation, but I would like to emphasize on how youth or different sectors, including public and private sectors, could involve in climate change mitigation, as we African countries, mostly or least developed countries, we emit less emissions, but we are vulnerable to climate change impacts. So we need to learn about or more on this market approach to see if those countries emit more and they don't face those impacts. So we need to establish like a channel that would cover those losses or damages. So that is included in this article. We introduced something called the Adaptation Fund, where there will be a levy or some percentage from this market approach that will go into Adaptation Fund to help those countries that face those more impacts from climate change to adapt to those impacts. So as here, we all need to participate, we all need to implement. And as currently, last year, in April, as East Africa countries, we learned from the West Africa countries where they have West Africa Alliance on carbon markets. So we've been engaged in establishing East Africa Carbon Alliance, where instead of as one country to sell or to involve into carbon market as one country, but also we will involve as a group of countries, and this will help in moderating or will help us, or will help each country from those who are not familiar with this carbon market to have benefits also. So I think that that's my presentation, or somehow not a presentation, but I would like to hear from others, some questions. I will be here to respond. Thank you all.
Thank you, Naukuri for this amazing information. As we can hear from you and Peace, we can see that Rwanda is putting effort to to include even youth in this fight against climate change. So I would like to tell you that we are going to question and answer session. Everyone who has a question in the presentation of our speakers is welcome to ask his question or her question. So I saw people who asked their question. And let me read them. This is from Mutesima Merina, and she was asking, I would like to ask if you have climate data and some projections so far, or if you still have to work on it. This is the question to Mr. Patrick Mugabo.
Thank you, Umutesi, for this interesting question. Actually, we have some data on climate because in Rwanda we have been collecting climate data since 1919s. If you look at the second national communication and even the third, you will find that we also use data from 1970s up to now or even beyond when we are doing analysis and projections. So there is some climate data. If you are interested in some data set, maybe you can pay us a visit. In IREMA, we have a climate data officer. He can be very helpful. So I think that answered your question.
Okay, I hope she's satisfied. We have another question from Gilbert. He was asking, also it is a question to you. He was asking, through updated national determined contributions, BAU estimates that greenhouse gas emissions will increase from 5.3 million tons of carbon dioxide to 12.1 million tons of carbon dioxide by 2030. He was saying that he has tried to read the document, but he didn't find the Rwanda's emission reduction target by 2030. He would like to know about that.
Actually, business as usual are like the scenarios if you do, like if you do nothing, if you continue to do business as you have been doing it. So since we have an adaptation part, I mean a mitigation part on the NDC, that means that we are trying to reduce those emissions. Of course, by 2030, we'll have some emissions, but the action is included in the NDCs. They will try to curb them, and that will be the contribution of Rwanda as far as the emissions are concerned. I don't have the number of the targeted emissions here with me, but I am very sure if you look at the mitigation contributions, we will find a lot of conclusions from the analysis made during the preparation of this updated NDC. Otherwise, you cannot just discuss about business as usual without saying what you are trying to achieve as alternative. So I'm sorry I don't have the exact figure for the target, but I am sure it is there. Most of my contribution was on the adaptation part. That is why I have really not all the facts with me at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, and where can he find them, if like where he can find this targeted emission reduction?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. They must be in the document somewhere. I don't have it with me at the moment, but they must be there somewhere. Sorry, I cannot say the page or the section's title name, but they have to be there certainly.
Okay, if the document has been officialized, maybe on internet he can find it.
Sure, it's published. It's on our website.
Okay. We have another question from Betty. She was asking, as I can see, there is inclusiveness policy. Within its principle, it indicates that there is youth involvement in environmental management and climate change intervention. I would like to know, so far, how does this policy is being implemented for its successfulness, and also which strategies are you using so that it can be productive timely? That's her question.
I assume that is directed to me, right?
Yes, to you, yes.
Okay, thank you. As I said, this policy is new. It is from, actually it was passed in 2019, I think. Yeah, 2019. So even before this policy, we were doing some business with the youth. For instance, the Green Fighters, you have been collaborating with the Ministry of Environment and REMA and other stakeholders for some time.
Yes.
And it's not just the Green Fighters, there are other youth groups which have been collaborating with REMA through various initiatives. And most of the work focused mostly on education, awareness, and grassroots projects, especially in our departments of environmental mainstreaming and education. So in the future, we look forward to come up with even more strategies and more ways to engage the youth. And I am really grateful for this initiative of yours, because you came to us this time, but we also responded positively to your invitation. And this have been the case for some time. And I was also informed that you take part in COPs, right?
Yes.
In a conference of parties.
Yes, our negotiators has took part in these 2 last years in COPs.
Okay, that is a good example of how you and the environment sector are collaborating in the fight against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you too. I saw that Emmanuel has raised his hand. Maybe he can ask his question. Emmanuel Shaka. If not, we can continue with the questions. There is a question for Emmanuel Ntawukuriryayo. So as a negotiator, what is your insight on the agriculture, flood, and early warning system?
Sorry?
There is a question for you as a mitigation negotiator. What is your insight on the agriculture, flood, and early warning system?
Of course, when we talk about climate change policies and what, we want to reduce those vulnerable people or sectors like agriculture, as you said. As you have seen Rwanda Meteorological Agency has tried to warn farmers whether there will be more rain that could take away or that could damage their crops. But I'm sure that responsible institutions are trying to establish that warning system that will help farmers as well as people to evacuate where it's sensitive to flooding, because we can take all things like those clubs where they are and take them to another part. We have to build that warning system that will tell those farmers that these things could happen. So if this thing could happen in this certain time, you can like harvest what has been elevated, or some crops that have been grown. But also this warning system, I'm sure that responsible institutions in Rwanda are trying to establish so that it could help those farmers as well as people. As you have seen that we have lost many people, we have lost many crops because of this flooding. So I'm sure that like in I can say like 5 years or more, but in coming years there will be this warning system that will tell the people, or before the things happen, that they could evacuate or do something else to reduce those impacts of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Naukuriryayo. Let's proceed to another question. There is a question to Eva Peace. Do you see any hope for the increase of the youth negotiators under the UNFCCC? What can be our starting point? I mean youth. Eva, are you hearing me?
Yes, thank you, Karen. There is hope, and it has started with our country, of course. I want to thank Rema for giving us the opportunity to attend the two last COP. But for the youth to be able to increase more youth in UNFCCC process, one of the thing we can do, I think that we've started, is to bring public awareness on climate change, to give some trainings, to be able to understand more of the complexity of the UNFCCC. Like I said before, my first COP wasn't like I thought it was. The following year, I've been able to attend a training given, which have helped me in the COP25 to understand more. So I've found that for us to be able to engage in different COPs, we need to know more. So that's why I'm focusing on trainings, on reading there's many websites, free websites, that give courses on people who are interested to know more about the UNFCCC negotiation process, like UNFCCC Learn or UNITAR. There's also some FONERGUA, also on the website of FONERGUA, there's some courses on how to do bankable projects. So if we involve in developing projects which are with the aim to adapt to climate change, there will be recognition of the youth the recognition of the youth, of the actions of the youth in addressing climate change, which also help in nominating you to be able to take part in the negotiation, to bring your voices, or the youth voices on the policy you want to be, on policy design, etc. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peace. I would like to call Emma Shaka. Emmanuel Shaka, he has a question. You can ask it, please.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers today.
We can't hear you.
Manuel, Patrick,
okay.
and Peter. I have a question. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you well. Now we can hear you.
Sorry, I have network issues, but I would like to direct my question to Mugabo Patrick. He said of something like how they monitor the policies and how these policies are being implemented. He mentioned the different ways on how these policies are being implemented through Imihigo and going down to different ministerial obligations. So I would like to ask Mugabo on how, I mean, since this climate issue is a cross-cutting issue, and we've been seeing, let it be the NDCs, let it be the strategies, indicating on how different government arms are to be able to implement or execute different activities on a certain project. I would like to ask Patrick on how he can gauge the partnership, the synergy between government arms, I mean government institutions, then with the private sector, since we have been observing ambiguity in implementation of certain projects, mainly from donors. So I would like to, on a personal perspective, how Patrick can gauge the partnership between those implementing entities to obtain the objective of the different projects. Thank you.
Okay, Patrick can answer you.
Thank you. Actually, the government work with many stakeholders, including private sector, in many ways. If you look at the initiatives in REMA and the Ministry of Environment, you will see that the private sector is a member of different committees and different thematic working groups, and all of the initiatives, almost of them, consider the private sector as the key partner. For instance, if you look at the strategy that I mentioned, the area, the green growth and the climate resilience strategy, you will see that the private sector federation is listed alongside the ministries such as Minagri, Minalog, among the key partners in the implementation of the strategy. So in implementation, every project has a steering committee, and where applicable, the private sector alongside other stakeholders are invited to be part of those committees. Someone mentioned about the Green Climate Fund, and you may already know that REMA is the national designated entity for the GCF. So here in REMA, when we are assessing projects to be submitted to GCF, the committee, which is the National Coordination Committee, which does that job, one of the members of that committee is the Private Sector Federation, meaning that business people are not really left behind. We try to involve them as much as we can. And in the future, we expect to see even more results. For instance, there is a plan to have a second organization here in Rwanda, which is certified to receive GCF funds other than the Ministry of Environment. And we are trying to advance the proposal of BRD, Banque Rwandaise de Développement, to be ranked at the level of the Ministry of Environment, so that business people will get funding much more easily in the future. Thank you.
Okay, I hope Shaka is satisfied. So there is another question. A question from Richard Ndichunguye asking, peace, what are the key achievements in terms of climate change finance since Rwanda news took part in the UNFCCC? Yeah. Eva, please, do you hear me?
Hey, Karen, can you repeat again the question?
Okay. What are the key achievements in terms of climate change finance since Rwanda news took part in the UNFCCC? Hope you heard it. Okay.
Thank you. One of the achievements I could mention, since we've been taking part of the UNFCCC negotiation, as the green fighter, we have received the funding from one of our projects, and I think this is mainly due to training we have received. The whole team, the green fighter, and I guess this is because of the information we have being part of the COPs. We have been able to talk with different donors, different people. There are different people in there, and we have different information reaching us. And that's not the end of it. We are still wanting to increase numbers of negotiators from 3 to many others. So some of us are working on myself. I'm being trained in climate finance, but also on loss and damage. When it comes to loss and damage, I'll say that many countries are facing, like Rwanda, we are facing floods and everything, but there is loss. You want to be able to have funds which are directly going to support people who have experienced like the loss of crops, their habitats. Those people need money. So from there, the number of negotiators, Rwanda negotiators, it's bound to increase. And I will call upon anyone who wants to know more to start documenting himself on what she can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So we have less than 20 minutes. Maybe we can try to answer the left questions quickly. I see that Umutesi want to ask her question. Yes, you can ask it, please.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, okay.
Thank you, Colleen. I don't know if it is a question, but I will be touching two speakers, Emmanuel and Patrick. Emmanuel was saying about the some initiatives in carbon market. Yeah, they are very difficult terms which are not easy to be understood like local persons. So, but it's nice because you are talking to educated persons. But I would like to ask how, like, what are the measures? Of course, you are saying about the education trainings, but what about how do you approach the local people, those people who are in the villages? Because this climate change, it's all about every person, the resources we are using, what we consume, the way we are dressing, everything is linked to climate change if you read it deeply. So how do we, of course, also Mugabo said how the mitigations will be achieved through sectors, district levels, but I don't see the way to approach those people, uneducated persons, like to tell them the things of climate change. And for the second, Emmanuel was saying about like Western countries, they are releasing more emissions of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Yes, I agree with you. But they are also the ones who have the capacity to reduce them. For example, I don't remember the figures very well, but in the Netherlands, they have some targets to reduce greenhouse gases emissions in the atmosphere before the end of this century. I think at the end of this century, they'll be achieved almost 100% CO2 free, like they will no longer releasing some CO2 in the atmosphere. For that, they are using electrical cars, they are building, they have a lot of wind power for energy, like they are changing from those things which emit CO2 to none CO2, like those ones which not emit CO2. So what I want to mention is like, even though Western countries release more of CO2, but they are the ones also who can reduce them because they have the financial means, as we are saying. So what I want to say is like, all of us as youth people, we have to think in different angles, in different perspectives, because we are the next rulers of our country, to think like how we will deal with this effect, because we will be the one who will be dealing with them in the next generations. So all of us, we have tasks to think deeply how we be dealing with this. And for Patrick, I would say, what are the target to achieve? You were saying about mitigations and policies, but are there some limit? Is it about 2050, 2060? How are you, like, what are the target you are working on it? Thank you.
Thank you, Umutesi. Thank you for your comment. So I would like to request Patrick, maybe he can answer on what are the targets that we have to achieve. And after him, now Kwirjao can maybe give a comment on what he can say on local people who are most affected and who also participate in this cause of climate change. So Mr. Patrick, you can maybe answer her, and then after now Kwirjao. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. Actually, on the question of targets, this is a very difficult question because if you look at the Constitution, NST1, and other guiding documents that we follow here in Rwanda, the target is not numbers, is just a narrative, the well-being of Rwandans. That is the target. So what we do as the sector technicians is try to understand what well-being of Rwandans means in terms of environment. So in terms of environment, that means less air pollution. In terms of climate change, that means reduced vulnerability to climate change and reduced emissions. So if we look at all the policies and the strategies that I mentioned, the activities and the actions and everything included in them is aimed at achieving just that. So we mentioned the NDCs, which have the targets for 2030. What is included in the NDCs was just formulated because we entered the Paris Agreement. But before that, in Rwanda, we were talking about thinking about the plans for 2050. And that was just next to the 20, what was the continuation of 2020 vision. So at smaller time scales, we have NSTs. Now we are implementing the NST1. And in the sector, we have this GGCRS and other sector strategies. So if we look at the sector strategies, each one has specific targets for that particular time frame. But if you combine them at the national level, I would say that the target is just achieving or improving or moving towards better and better or improve the quality of life of Rwandans.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I think the previous question was also in part addressed to me, how Rema is outreaching to those people at the grassroots levels. I think I can also answer to that partly, and maybe Nhakuriryayo will complement. Normally, we make mass communications when there are big events such as World Environment Days or World Environment Weeks. We do also have other big events such as Wetlands Weeks and Days and Biodiversity Days and so forth. So during these periods, we take them as opportunities to pass our messages to the general population, and we do that through TV shows, radio presentations, and we also have presence online. We have a climate portal where we put every report published and any other information we deem important to the general public. Maybe Nhakuriryayo will complement on how that happens at community levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mugabo. Nhakuriryayo, you can speak, please.
Okay. My comments on what Mutesi has mentioned, like on how those West countries are able to reduce emissions. Yes, at their national level, they have some units. They have to reduce, so that could be reduced, but also to achieve or to put into actions the Paris Agreement. All countries, mostly those Western, they need some units outside their countries, even though they implement some actions like what you mentioned about using electrical cars. Yes, they use those actions, but also they need some outside units from some countries. On measures to local people, an example I could give you is about catchment restoration. When we restore our land, we increase benefits to those local people who feed us and also who feed themselves. So, by restoring these lands, we increase crops and also reduce uh, some greenhouse gases into atmosphere. So this restoration could be one of the examples that the government is taking to reach those local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Naokwijayo. Here we have a question from CV Mwezimana. She's asking to Mugabo, I would like to know what is your part to achieve SDG 13 at the same time SDG 6? Mr. Mugabo, I hope you heard the question.
Can you please repeat it?
She's asking, what is your part to achieve SDG 13 and at the same time SDG 6?
Okay, thank you. Actually, if SDG 13 is all about climate action, and as I mentioned earlier, the strategies of green growth and the climate resilience strategy and the environment and climate change policy and all the other sector strategies that contribute to the implementation of climate targets, they are all geared to implement the SDG number 13. And I think SDG 6 is about water, right?
Yes, it's about water and sanitation.
Water and sanitation.
Yes.
And if you look at if you remember what I said about the key sectors in climate change activities, water is one of the top key sectors, but it's not alone. There are also transport, energy, and many other sectors. So we do have some plans for water related to waters. Even in the NDCs, you will find some activities related to the water sector. So what else? I think it was just number 13 and 6, right?
And 6, yes.
I don't know if I answered your question very well, but the Department of Climate Change in REMA is there just to achieve SDG 13. And the Rwanda Water Board is there and many other partners to contribute to number 6. So the government is doing a lot, not just on those 2 SDGs, but on all SDGs. And as you know, all those SDGs are also cross-cutting. So it's not just REMA and MOE, it's almost everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you too. We are left with 2 questions. There's someone called LUM. He asked if he can use the microphone. Yes, he can use it. Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa actually. My question goes to Patrick. I would like to know, recently in the past years, we've seen that the floods are more recurrent and that the damage they are causing are severe, and this is partly associated with climate change, because with the changing climates, there are more floods and droughts in some places and landslides. So my question is, during these days, there are many measures being put in place to see that people can be safe against those floods and droughts and landslides. I would like to know what are the actions that you've put in place to ensure that climate change is considered during the implementation of those measures, such that we can be sure that the measures are reliable in the future, that they can protect those people in areas, in flood-prone areas. How do you work with stakeholders? I mean, the Ministry of Environment and the Meteor. How do you work with them to ensure that climate change is taken into account and that the measures that are suggested or that are to be implemented are reliable enough and are safe and are able to protect the people? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Patrick can help to answer.
Thank you, Lisa, for the question. Actually, REMA and the Ministry of Environment have been doing a lot in ensuring that climate change is taken into account in many actions. Since EDPRS 2, environment and climate change were recognized as cross-cutting issues. That was not the case before. And what this change brought in was that what was planned for in the GGCRS that I mentioned in the area should be implemented by all sectors, and that was mandatory. Before, MOE, I mean the Minister of Environment and REMA had to go to other ministries and negotiate, can you please implement this because it looks like it could be in your mandate and so forth. And if those in that ministry were really understanding, they could say, okay, let's put it in our plan, and they would have that incorporated in their plan. And after EDPRS 2, it was not much negotiations. It was mandatory. So in some cases, they would come to the Ministry of Environment and ask, it looks like we have to implement this and this and this in order to achieve the strategy. How are we supposed to implement it? Can you please help us mainstream it in our sector strategies and action plans? So that was really a big change to see climate change recognized as a cross-cutting issue in the country. Recently, during the preparation of NST1, we had not much challenges in communicating with those key sectors and of stakeholders. Now you mentioned about the disasters that have been seeing recently. That is a big challenge that we have, because climate variability and extreme weather events are causing many natural disasters, not only in Rwanda, but in other countries located between the tropics. As you know, when they say that temperature will increase or have increased, we have seen an increase in the temperature of 1 degree globally. That means that between the tropics, the change is somewhere between 2 or around 2. So here in Rwanda, we are much more affected by those changes, because you have seen big variations in climate. And I also mentioned an issue that we have of high population density. So as a result, you find many households in places where they should not be in the first place. Because in Rwanda, we tend to live everywhere. We don't care if it's a steep slope, if it's a lowland. We don't really have choice. You find households in wetlands, in places like Gatata and everywhere. So in the future, we will continue the policies of reducing risk, and we will also continue to make sure that the future measures take into account climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see that we already reached the time, but there's someone else who asked a question and another who has raised his hand. Maybe you can permit me to ask those two and then we are done. There's a question from Jean-Paul. He's asking, in 2005, Rwanda was carbon net sink due to carbon dioxide sequestration. Due to, okay, with forests, what is the current situation? Maybe I can repeat it. Rwanda was carbon net sink due to carbon dioxide sequestration with forests. What is the current situation? To you, Mr. Mugabo.
Okay, thank you. I don't have the actual information on the current situation, but I can make an opinion as just someone in the sector. Was the baseline in 2015 or 2025? Which year did you mention in the question? 2015?
No, 2005.
Okay, 2005. That was 15 years back, right?
Yes. Yes.
I would say that our emissions have increased because the country has developed so much. If you look around you, the number of cars passing, the number of spatial or non-spatial industrial zones around, it looks like there have been some increase in emissions. Even the demand for amakara and other fuels have increased. So I don't know if we are still net sinkers or if we have gone to the other side, but it's clear that we have had some increase in our emissions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Ineza can ask her question, please. Over to you, Ineza. You can ask your question.
Hey, hi everyone.
Hi.
Mine is not really a question. I just want to tap in the question asked by Mameline. She asked about these carbon market, how they work, and also she pointed out the fact that developed countries such as the Netherlands are able to have and to mitigate or cut off their emission, but because they have power, if we can say financial power. And also she asked how we do reach the local community, especially people who are much more vulnerable, but they do not have access to get information on the negotiation process or the project that are in within their opportunity. So first, I'll say, like, yes, developed country has the means to mitigate and cut off their emission because they have the technology and we can say that they have also the skills. But for developing countries such as Rwanda, we have a mechanism called clean development mechanism. This is a place where a country such as Rwanda is allowed to develop, but at the same time being clean, which means lowering their emissions. For example, in Rwanda, we are developing and we have a higher population density, but right now we are trying to have electrical bike, even electrical cars. These are the similar platform which are available for developing countries to be developed, but in a sense that they will not cause higher emission in the atmosphere. So regarding also the thing of how we approach the local community, I would like to give an example that when the negotiations are being taken, there's a voice from civil society organization. This is a mean that cover much more of all the vulnerable community on the global level. They have the representation even from indigenous indigenous people, youth, women, and they all come up with the same voice. So the way to increase the local community participation is to empower the participation from civil society, because the civil society has the means to reach the community on a much more impactful level rather than the government. So for us as a developing country and stepping up in the negotiations, I think is to be for great value if we could highlight the importance of civil society representation as observers within the negotiation, because they bring the voice of all the people, for the community who are voiceless within the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ineza. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We come to the end of our session. I would like to thank our speakers. Thank you, Mr. Mugabo. Thank you, Ms. Mkairanga. Thank you, Mr. Nakwiryayo, for your informative presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you also to everyone who asked their question. I hope they were satisfied. I would like also to invite you to the tomorrow webinar, where we'll be talking more deeply on the youth role in this climate change fight. So thank you all. Have a great evening and stay safe. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.